weggeflogen, weg, kein Misrach suchen die nächtige Tag.
My father and mother were very religious, and my brothers, my older brothers, were not. So the kids were not. I can't say that we lived as we live now here, but I can tell you one thing, that I had a very good childhood. I did not have any problem with food. But I remember hearing that my brothers did have when they were younger in the shtetl. And I always pitied these people. How can you live a life in Warsaw, such a beautiful life? It was a full life. Our house was full of people. Every brother had friends that came in and singing and discussions and reading. It was going on. It was really something. I went to a Yiddish school, a Bundes school, that taught everything in Yiddish. Anything, geography, arithmetic, and everything was taught in Yiddish. The anti-Semitism became very severe. And all the time, you know, I used to go with the Chevre to the parks, and we always had fights, always, with the others. And I have to tell you, very brave friends who stood up and picked up fights. But later, I remember I had a boyfriend, and we used to go to the parks, and we always were chased. And when the war broke out, the first day of the war, 1939, right away there was bombardment, and right away our house was on fire. I lived in the heart of the Jewish section, and they knew exactly where to throw their bombs. Oldest was a sister, then came 6 boys, and I was the youngest. Those that stayed in Warsaw, nobody survived. But me, myself, and 2 brothers ran away.
So what was your family's relationship to the Arbiter Ring, and what was it to Yiddish?
Well, my parents spoke to one another in Yiddish, and they wanted us to learn the language, which I'm so grateful that we did. My sister Edith, your grandmother, went to Shule, and she was very, very good with that, and she was in many performances of plays, and she also learned to read and write it, as well as I did the same thing. And I also performed on stage, and I'm just so pleased that that language is part of me. Ich hab Yiddish sehr lieb.
My grandparents spoke Yiddish all the time. As we got older and we started going to school, I spoke more English. I forgot most of my Yiddish. I still, to this day, can understand it, but I don't speak any Yiddish anymore. And I found that my parents spoke Yiddish when they didn't want me to understand what they were saying.
My parents, of course, were both from Russia. Now, when we were little children, they would speak Yiddish, but they began to realize that we were catching on to the Yiddish. So they started to speak Russian when they wanted to keep secrets from us. I went on and I was bar mitzvahed, but I went to Hebrew school before the bar mitzvah for 6 years. Now, I found Hebrew school to be very tedious, never liked it, the teachers were lousy. So after a while I began to cut school. I never told my parents that, but I cut school at least once or twice every month just to go out and play football. My father's father, my grandfather, was a very prominent man in the community. He was highly respected in the synagogue, and in fact, he actually wrote a Torah. It took many years, and he wrote it by hand, just copying the Torah, and then he contributed it to the synagogue.
When I was in high school, I joined Junior Hadassah. I became very active. I was president of Junior Hadassah in high school. I was sent by the Jewish community to go to Brandeis Camp, which gave me a background in leading Young Judea and being more active in the Jewish community.
The other side was I guess, Irish Catholic, etc. type community. And the guys from that community would come across the bridge to try and beat up Jewish boys. Now, we learned that they were doing this as a group, so we always managed to have a group of us together to meet them. I won't say we ever beat them up, but we never lost to them.
We were Orthodox, a typical Orthodox family. We had 2 sets of dishes, Milchik and Fleischik, and I went to Hebrew school probably starting from age 4 or 5, on through my bar mitzvah. The best memories was I was, I guess, a good student, so I got a lot of positive feedback. And the worst memories was we couldn't be out in the street playing ball. We had to be in Cheder.
Alan and the rabbi were very, very close. And I think that might have had something to do with his continuing until even he was in college. He still went home and went to see the rabbi.
I came to New York and was quite surprised to see the number of Jews here and people wearing the Star of David. I guess in high school I wasn't involved with it, but there were several of my friends were going to a Boy Scout meeting. And a car stopped and said, "Hey, these guys are Jews," and they started to chase them and beat them up.
And Alan, when I married Alan in 1952, he had 46 aunts and uncles. My father and mother spoke Yiddish from Russia, Poland. His mother and father were born in America, and when my parents met them, my father and mother were incredulous. Their Yiddish was perfect.
And I learned a good part of my Yiddish from listening to Yiddish records. They had popular Yiddish records, and with a hand crank Victrola that I would, it was in our attic.
I was part of a generation born during the Great Depression, but I was nevertheless aware of the fact that I was Jewish, and there was a certain comfort in that I was surrounded by other people who were just like me. I had a distinct feeling of pride that has lasted all these years in the role that ordinary American Jews played in helping secure civil rights for people other than themselves. I experienced, as a young boy, being called a dirty Jew, singled out for no other reason than the fact that I was Jewish. At a picnic once, attacked a group of us who were Jewish, beat us, and we were too few to effectively fight back. Family was everything. When I was growing up, it meant unconditional love. My parents, who were always volunteering for various good causes, whether it was being out on Poppy Day to honor the veterans and sell poppies, or whether it was throwing parties at Veterans Administration hospitals. The same fundamental values that I learned early on about Judaism are closer to me now at this point in my life than at any other time beforehand.
Goldene Pave geflogen weg, kein Misrach suchen die nächtige Tag. Trilli, trala, trilli.